What if everything you believed about inflammation control was missing one critical truth? What if the superfood you've trusted for years, turmeric, is not actually the most powerful natural anti-inflammatory tool your body can use? And what if science has already identified something even more effective? Something that doesn't just suppress inflammation, but actually helps your body turn it off at the source. Now, turmeric is not useless. That needs to be clear from the beginning. Its active compound, curcumin, has been studied for decades and does show real anti-inflammatory effects in the body. It interacts with inflammatory pathways and helps reduce signaling molecules involved in chronic inflammation. But here's where things get interesting and where most people, especially older adults, are misled. Because inflammation is not just something you reduce. It is something your body is supposed to actively resolve. And this is where modern science is changing everything we thought we knew. Researchers have discovered that certain nutrients can lower key inflammatory markers in the body, including interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha, two of the most powerful drivers of chronic inflammation. In clinical trials involving middle-aged and older adults, one group of nutrients consistently showed strong effects in lowering these inflammatory compounds: omega-3 fatty acids. This is not theory. This comes from randomized controlled trials comparing supplementation groups with placebo groups, and the results consistently show a meaningful reduction in inflammatory cytokines. Now, the real question is, why does this matter so much after the age of 50? Because aging is not just about wrinkles or slower movement. At a biological level, something deeper is happening inside the body. Scientists call it inflammaging. This is a long-term, low-grade, chronic inflammation that quietly builds over time. It doesn't cause sudden pain or obvious symptoms in most cases. Instead, it slowly damages tissues in the background, affecting almost every major system in the body. It impacts the joints, making movement stiff and uncomfortable. It affects the brain, slowing down cognitive processing and memory. It damages blood vessels, increasing cardiovascular risk. And perhaps most importantly, it disrupts metabolism, changing how your body handles energy, sugar, and fat. Inflammation interferes with insulin signaling, increases stress on the liver, raises cortisol levels, and contributes to conditions like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, arthritis, and cognitive decline. So the real goal of healthy aging is not simply to reduce inflammation temporarily. It is to correct the biological signals that are creating it in the first place. To understand this better, think of inflammation like a fire alarm system inside your body. When there's an injury or infection, the alarm activates. That is a good thing. It alerts your immune system, brings repair cells to the area, and helps the body heal. Once the job is done, the alarm is supposed to switch off. But as we age, that system starts to malfunction. The alarm becomes overly sensitive. It starts reacting even when there is no real danger. Old immune cells remain active longer than they should. Damaged cells accumulate. Small inflammatory signals begin firing continuously in the background. And most importantly, the system never fully shuts down. This constant background noise of inflammation is what slowly wears the body down over time. Now, here is where the science becomes even more fascinating, because the body does not only have a system to start inflammation, it also has a built-in system designed to stop it completely, to resolve it, to finish the healing process properly. And this system depends on very specific molecules that your body creates from certain nutrients. These molecules are called resolvins and protectins. They are not just anti-inflammatory, they are inflammation-resolving agents. They actively signal immune cells to stop attacking, clean up damaged tissue, and restore balance. In other words, they do not just block the fire, they help turn it off and repair what was damaged. And this is where the real breakthrough begins, because the nutrients required to create these powerful resolving molecules do not primarily come from turmeric. They come from a very different source, one that science has repeatedly highlighted as one of the most powerful foods for healthy aging. And before we reveal exactly what that food is, it is important to first understand why turmeric alone, despite its popularity, may not be enough to control long-term chronic inflammation effectively. That is exactly what we will break down in the next section. Turmeric has built a powerful reputation over the years as one of the most trusted natural anti-inflammatory foods. Many people even consider it a kind of gold standard for controlling inflammation naturally. And to be fair, that reputation is not completely wrong. Its active compound, curcumin, has been studied extensively in scientific research. One of its key actions is its ability to influence inflammatory signaling pathways inside the body. In particular, curcumin can inhibit a major molecular switch known as NF-kappa B, which plays a central role in activating inflammation. When NF-kappa B becomes active, it triggers a cascade of inflammatory responses. It increases the production of cytokines such as interleukin-1, interleukin-6, and tumor necrosis factor alpha. These are some of the same molecules linked to chronic inflammation, aging, and disease progression. So in simple terms, turmeric can help reduce the activity of these inflammatory signals. That is the foundation of its health reputation. But here is the part most people never hear clearly enough. Turmeric mainly works by blocking inflammation signals, not by resolving inflammation completely. And that difference is not small. In fact, it is one of the most important distinctions in modern inflammation science. To understand this better, imagine inflammation as a fire inside a building. If firefighters arrive and start spraying water, that is helpful. The fire slows down. Damage is reduced. That is what turmeric is doing. It is helping reduce the intensity of the fire. But now imagine a different scenario. Instead of just slowing the fire, the system actually ensures the fire is fully extinguished, smoke is cleared, and the building begins to repair itself. That second process is not just suppression, it is resolution. And your body has a dedicated biological system designed specifically for this purpose. Scientists call it the Specialized Pro-Resolving Mediator System, or SPM system. This system produces powerful molecules known as resolvins, protectins, and mericins. Their job is not to suppress immune activity, but to actively switch it off once healing is complete and guide tissues back to a balanced state. This is what makes them fundamentally different from simple anti-inflammatory compounds. They do not just reduce the problem, they complete the healing cycle. Now, here is where aging becomes critically important. As people get older, especially after the age of 50, the body becomes less efficient at producing these resolving molecules. The inflammatory system continues to activate normally, but the off switch becomes weaker over time. This creates a dangerous imbalance. Inflammation continues in the background, but resolution does not happen efficiently anymore. That is one of the key reasons chronic inflammation becomes so persistent with age. Now, here is where modern nutritional science has made a major discovery. These powerful resolving molecules are not produced from turmeric or curcumin. They are produced from omega-3 fatty acids, especially EPA, eicosapentaenoic acid, and DHA, docosahexaenoic acid. These are healthy fats found primarily in certain types of fatty fish. When you consume omega-3s, your body does not simply store them as energy. Instead, enzymes actively convert them into resolvins and protectins, the very molecules responsible for shutting down inflammation properly. These compounds help signal immune cells to stop attacking, clear out damaged tissue, and restore balance in inflamed areas of the body. This is not theoretical biology. It has been demonstrated in multiple studies, including research published in journals like Nature Reviews Immunology, which shows that these molecules help resolve excessive immune activity and support tissue repair. In other words, omega-3 fatty acids don't just reduce inflammation markers, they help complete the entire inflammatory process in the correct way. Now think about what happens when the body lacks these nutrients. Inflammation starts normally when needed, but the resolution phase becomes weak or incomplete. As a result, low-grade inflammation can linger for months or even years. silently contributing to aging-related diseases. This is where many people make a critical mistake. They rely heavily on anti-inflammatory supplements like turmeric, thinking they are fully controlling inflammation. But if the body lacks the nutrients required for resolution, inflammation never truly finishes its cycle. It just gets reduced temporarily, not resolved completely. And that brings us to another important limitation of turmeric that most people are not aware of. Even when curcumin is effective, the body has a major challenge absorbing it properly. Research shows that curcumin has very low bioavailability when consumed on its own. This means that only a small fraction actually enters the bloodstream in an active form. That is why it is often combined with black pepper extract, piperine, which improves absorption. Without that combination, turmeric's real impact on chronic inflammation can be quite limited in practice, especially in long-term conditions. So, while turmeric has value, it does not fully activate the body's inflammation resolution system. It mainly acts as a supportive blocker of inflammatory signals. But what the body truly needs for long-term balance is something that activates the deeper healing pathways, the system that actually turns inflammation off completely. And this is where research consistently points to a very specific category of food that has a much more direct and powerful effect on inflammation control. That food group is fatty fish. Salmon, sardines, mackerel, herring, and anchovies are among the richest natural sources of omega-3 fatty acids on the planet. And in the next section, we will explore exactly how these foods influence inflammation at a cellular level and why their effect goes far beyond what most people imagine when they think of healthy fats. When we talk about the most powerful natural foods for controlling inflammation, fatty fish consistently stands out in scientific research, not because it simply reduces inflammation, but because it actively changes how the immune system behaves at a cellular level. We are talking about foods like salmon, sardines, mackerel, anchovies, and herring. These are not just sources of protein or healthy fats. They are biological regulators that directly influence inflammation pathways inside the body. Their power comes from two specific omega-3 fatty acids, EPA and DHA. Eicosapentaenoic acid and docosahexaenoic acid are not just nutrients the body uses for energy. They are structural and signaling molecules that become part of your cells and influence how those cells function. Here is what happens when you consume them regularly. Your body begins converting EPA and DHA into specialized molecules known as resolvins, protectins, and mycins. These are the same inflammation-resolving compounds we discussed earlier. But now we can see exactly where they come from. Think of these molecules as the body's internal peacekeeping system. When inflammation begins, immune cells rush in to protect the area. That is a normal and necessary response. But once the job is done, those immune cells need a clear signal to stop. Without that signal, they can continue releasing inflammatory chemicals even after the threat is gone. That is where resolvins come in. They act like biological instructions telling the immune system the danger is over. You can stand down now. At the same time, they also support the cleanup process by helping remove damaged cells and reducing unnecessary immune activity. This allows tissues to begin repairing themselves properly instead of remaining in a constant state of stress. This is why omega-3 fats are so powerful. They don't just suppress inflammation, they help restore balance. And this effect has been strongly supported by clinical research. For example, studies published in journals like Cell Metabolism have shown that omega-3 fatty acids can significantly reduce inflammatory cytokines while also improving how immune cells regulate metabolism. Another large-scale study in older adults found that omega-3 supplementation reduced levels of C-reactive protein and interleukin-6, both of which are key markers of chronic inflammation associated with aging and disease risk. Now, here is something especially important for seniors that often gets overlooked. Omega-3 fatty acids do more than influence immune signaling. They actually become part of your cell structure. Let's break this down simply. Every cell in your body is surrounded by a membrane. This membrane acts like a gatekeeper. It controls what enters the cell, what exits, and how signals are received from hormones and other cells. Now imagine what happens when that membrane becomes rigid or inflamed over time. Communication slows down. Nutrient absorption becomes less efficient. Hormonal signals weaken. This is exactly what happens with aging. But when omega-3 fatty acids are incorporated into these membranes, they improve flexibility and fluidity. This makes the cells more responsive and efficient. Insulin signals work better. Brain communication improves. Inflammatory stress decreases. This is one of the reasons omega-3 intake is linked to lower risk of heart disease, cognitive decline, arthritis, and metabolic disorders. It is not just about lowering inflammation markers in blood tests. It is about improving how your entire body communicates at the cellular level. Now let's connect this to metabolism for a moment, because this is where things become even more important. When inflammation is high, metabolism becomes disrupted. Cells stop responding properly to insulin. Fat storage increases. Energy production becomes less efficient. But omega-3 fats help reverse this process. They improve insulin sensitivity, reduce triglyceride levels, and support healthier fat metabolism. In other words, they help restore metabolic flexibility, the body's ability to switch between burning sugar and burning fat efficiently. This is especially important after the age of 50, when metabolic slowdown becomes more common. Now, the practical question is obvious. How much fatty fish do you actually need to see these benefits? According to major health organizations, including the American Heart Association, consuming fatty fish at least 2 times per week is associated with meaningful cardiovascular and anti-inflammatory benefits. A typical serving is about 3 to 4 ounces. The goal is consistency, not perfection. You do not need to eat fish every day. Instead, building a steady weekly pattern is what allows omega-3 levels to accumulate in the body over time. Because here is something important many people do not realize. Omega-3 fatty acids do not work like a quick medication. They work gradually. They become part of your cell membranes over weeks and months, slowly shifting how your body responds to inflammation. That is why long-term consistency matters far more than occasional high intake. Now, when choosing sources, sardines often stand out as one of the most powerful options. They are small, nutrient-dense fish that contain high levels of omega-3s, along with vitamin D, calcium, selenium, and high-quality protein. Because they are lower on the food chain, they also tend to have fewer environmental contaminants compared to larger fish. A simple and effective strategy recommended by many nutrition experts is to include 2 anti-inflammatory meals per week centered around fatty fish. For example, one meal could be sardines with olive oil, leafy greens, and avocado. Another could be grilled salmon with vegetables and a drizzle of extra virgin olive oil. These combinations are powerful because they don't just provide omega-3s. They also include antioxidants, fiber, and polyphenols, all working together to reduce oxidative stress and inflammation. And this combination effect is key, because inflammation is not caused by one factor alone. It is influenced by diet, stress, metabolism, and cellular damage all at once. So the more systems you support at the same time, the stronger the overall anti-inflammatory effect becomes. In the next section, we will go deeper into something many people struggle with as they age: metabolism and weight gain. Because inflammation is not just a hidden driver of disease, it is also one of the biggest reasons fat loss becomes more difficult after 50, even when diet habits seem unchanged. And understanding that connection changes everything.